Okay, boom! We are currently on 2,640 subscribers.
Yes!
Only this much away from 1 million. Alright, let's get into the video. According to the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope has full supreme power of the whole church all across the world. This is because the Pope is regarded as the successor of Saint Peter, the leader of the apostles. Throughout history, the Pope's influence and power is very apparent. He even has the ability to depose emperors, like the one time Pope Gregory VII deposed King Henry IV. So you've got a young King Henry IV, who became king when he was only 15, and he decides, I'm king, I should have more power over the clergy, and as a matter of fact, I should be able to appoint local church officials. And then you've got Pope Gregory VII, who's like, you know what, the Roman church needs more power, and as a matter of fact, mate, I'll decide who gets appointed as local church officials. Probably not in that accent though. So this leads to the Pope and the King going back and forth, and one day the Pope's like, you know what, boom, as a matter of fact, you're deposed and no one owes you loyalty no more, how about that one? And the King was like, whoa now, buddy, let's take a beat here, let's calm it down. But it was too late. The Pope had made it official. So some time passes, and the growing angst that King Henry was feeling in fear of rebellion of his people only got worse over time. So he finally decides, you know what, it's time for me to apologize, and he makes the dangerous trek all the way to see the Pope. It was a brutal winter in 1077, but the Pope made the king and his people wait outside for 3 days in the cold before agreeing to see them. Finally, King Henry walks through the gates barefoot and begs for forgiveness, and the Pope undeposes him. Is that a word? Anyway, they all lived happily ever after. So yeah, the Pope had a lot of power. Now, the pursuit of power will make a man do wicked things. Things like digging up a dead predecessor Pope, putting him on trial, finding him guilty, cutting off a couple of his fingers, burying him again, only to dig him back up, and then throw his body into the Tiber River. And yeah, that's a real story. In the 9th century, the Pope had the power to crown the Holy Roman Emperor. So Pope Moses crowns a man called the Duke of Spoleto. And later down the line, the Duke's son, Lambert. But the problem was, Moses did this reluctantly. He didn't really want to crown them. So in 896, Moses was like, hey, forget you, man. I'm crowning my dog King Arnulf of the East Franks as emperor. So Arnulf is emperor now. All is going well until he becomes paralyzed. So Arnulf's like, yo, forget this, please take me back to my native land, Germany. And he just goes. At this point, Moses has passed away. It's been 7 months. Are you with me? I know there's a lot to take in, but trust me, it's worth it. So there's a new Pope, Stephen VI. Do you remember Lambert, the Duke's son? That's Stephen's boy. And Stephen's like, you know what, I want to crown him emperor. And everyone's like, nah. Moses has already crowned Arnulf. That's our emperor, G. So there's a lot of dispute. So at this point, Pope Stephen VI had to find a way to delegitimize Moses. So he ordered for his body to be dug up and put on trial. They dressed the body up all nice and even got a deacon to speak on his behalf. And then Stephen proceeds to throw allegations at the corpse, including perjury and breaking canonical law. And no surprise, Moses was found guilty. So they chopped some of his fingers off, buried him, dug him back up, and then threw the remaining body into the Tiber River. But don't worry though, this story does have a happy ending. Stephen was eventually found guilty, jailed, and strangled to death. This story is about a man named Tsutomu Yamaguchi. I hope I've said that correctly. So he was on his way to work in a little place called Hiroshima in 1945. As he's enjoying the breeze, he sees something in the sky around about 2 miles away. Any guesses on what it was? Yeah, the atomic bomb. Yamaguchi had just enough time to hide in a ditch before the bomb detonated, and miraculously he survived. God knows how, but the Hiroshima train station was still working. So he gets on the train and makes his way to his family in Nagasaki. A couple days later, Yamaguchi's called into work. They just want him to explain what he saw. So he begins telling his story, and halfway through his story, unbeknownst to him, the second atomic bomb detonates over Nagasaki. Luckily, Yamaguchi was in a room that had reinforced concrete walls, and he survived again. So now he makes his way to go find his family and son. Radioactive rain poured down, and temperatures on the ground reached 4,000 degrees Celsius. By the time he gets to his house, he finds it destroyed. But thankfully, earlier in the day, his wife and son had gone out to get him burn ointment, so they both survived. So Yamaguchi survived 2 atomic bombs and the subsequent radiation exposure. He died in 2010 when he was 93 years old. Napoleon Bonaparte. When you see portraits of him now, you might see a 5'7" pale fat man, but don't be fooled, he's one of, if not the greatest general in history. His life was literally a movie. He went from being a foot soldier in the French Revolutionary Wars to the Emperor of France until he was defeated by the coalition forces at the famous Battle of Waterloo. But let me slow down a little bit. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Our story starts in 1814. Napoleon is emperor, and 2 years earlier he tried to invade Russia with 500,000 men, which went absolutely terribly. The Russians just refused to engage, and eventually the brutal Russian weather ended up killing most of the French army. Napoleon retreats and just about makes it back. So Duty has hit the fan. Napoleon is completely defeated in 1814 by coalition forces and exiled. He's sent to a little island called Elba, which is off the west coast of Italy. Now you're probably thinking, why did they exile him and not kill him? Considering he was seen as a tyrant, well, the coalition countries were led by different monarchies and they didn't want to set the example of killing a king and give the public any ideas. The monarchs have to remain consequence-free, silly. Anyway, he was made ruler of Elba and controlled an army of around 1,000 men. And to be fair to him, he ended up turning the island around. He improved the economy and put in place general reforms that helped Elba thrive. And then one day he decided, I want to take back France. So he sets off with a small contingent to France, and on March 1st, 1815, Napoleon lands on the shores of France. Louis XVIII, the king of France at the time, had heard about Napoleon's arrival and sent a large force to deal with the ex-emperor, but this would turn out to be a fatal mistake, as the French army was full of Bonapartists, and they literally left to join Napoleon. After hearing this news, King Louis XVIII had the genius idea of sending even more men. Napoleon's army grew into a force to be reckoned with. He marched on France, took it back, forcing King Louis to flee, and Napoleon was emperor again. This wouldn't last long as he was defeated again, this time exiled to an island much further away where he would spend the rest of his days.
Thank you for joining me, baby. This an outro song, yeah. And I know we're done, it's the end of the road. And it's time to go home and I'm done.